Well, I hope you're having a good day. This is another video from your nerdy criminal justice professor, Dr. B. In this class, we're dealing with some very controversial topics. Um, these topics elicit very strong emotions from almost everyone, and it's important that we continue to be respectful with each other when we agree and when we disagree. Um, There is nothing wrong with disagreement. The question is, do we do it respectfully or disrespectfully? I want to say thank you to the students for being so respectful so far this semester. We really need to keep that up. We might be getting emotionally charged at times, but it's important to remain academic. You see, politicians don't mind using poor logic to win an argument. Academics want to find valid, confirmable evidence to support our claims. And as academics, we never believe that we've said the final word on anything, even if we have. To give you an example, um, it is very rare to read in a journal of astrophysics or of quantum physics, the hard sciences where we can directly observe the phenomena. Um, it is very rare to read someone saying that they have proven their point or that we can conclude that it is always this way. They will say, they will conclude based on this research, it is likely that the Earth will continue to orbit the sun um, in an elliptical fashion, moving so many tiny, tiny fractions of an inch every year. Now, we can observe and know certainly that those things are happening because we can directly observe them. But the physics professors who do the research will not conclude that this is a certainty, no matter how certain it is. I just want to point that out. So, in the social sciences, and criminal justice and criminology are in the social sciences, but in the social sciences, we can't directly observe. We can directly observe outcomes, but we can't directly observe the phenomenon itself or the phenomena itself. So, um, say for instance, for psychology, okay, I can directly observe the symptoms of depression, but I cannot directly observe depression. In criminal justice, I can observe the outward behavior of a police officer, but I cannot observe the thoughts in their head. It's very important for us to keep that in mind, that we have limits on what we can and cannot observe in the social sciences. Now, having said that, I'm going to challenge everyone because I think this is something that we need to do a better job at. Um, the book itself saying something, okay? So, Criminal Injustice by Matthew Robinson, and the various people that Matthew Robinson um, quotes and references, um, did they have their evidence properly aligned? Does their evidence demand the conclusion that they make? So I want for us to think in terms of criminal justice when we're thinking in terms of the research here. In criminal justice, the way it's supposed to work, and I'm not saying it does work this way, but the way it's supposed to work in court is that there's supposed to be evidence that supports the conclusion of guilt or innocence. So what's going to happen is the prosecutor is going to present evidence. The defense attorney is supposed to demonstrate how the evidence that the prosecutor presents does not demonstrate guilt. And then the defense attorney will present evidence of innocence, and the prosecutor will try to refute that and show how that evidence does not support a finding of not guilty or a finding of innocence. There should be information that, or I'm sorry, data, evidence that supports the conclusions that we are making. And in order to have beyond a reasonable doubt, there should not be other possible explanations. So let's say that someone is murdered at a public park, and they just happen to find an item that I lost close to the victim. Is that evidence supportive of a finding of guilt if they were to charge me? That is not, because if I'm the murderer, I could have dropped that while killing the person whose body they find in the park. However, it's a public park. I go to public parks a lot. I like public parks. So maybe I just happened to drop that at a completely different time and is completely unrelated to the murder. So that's evidence that puts me at the crime scene, but it doesn't put me at the crime scene at the moment the crime was committed. That's not evidence to support guilt. Let's think about that when it comes to the claims that we make. Now, I want you to notice I'm not picking sides here. I'm not picking sides on purpose. Okay, but I want you to evaluate Robinson's book as you're writing your assignments. Does the evidence he present support the conclusion that he's making, and that conclusion only? Could there be other conclusions from the same evidence that are just as valid, just as plausible? Very important for us to keep these kinds of things in mind, okay? Now, if you'll notice, I don't take sides in my feedback with you. Quite frankly, because you're not reading each other's feedback, just so you know, no matter which side of the argument you take, I always ask you a question that sounds like it's coming from the other side. I do that with everyone. Why? Because that will sharpen your thinking skills. Now, notice I didn't say sharpen your wit. I could care less about your wit being sharpened, meaning being able to make biting, sarcastic comments and things like that. I care about your thinking being sharpened. So it will sharpen your thinking. Now, some folks might step back and get angry at my questions, thinking that I'm taking a side. I'm not taking a side, because no matter whether I agree or disagree, I'm going to take the position of asking a question as though you have not convinced me yet. Okay? This is that kind of a class. These are not factual things. These are not objective answers. These are subjective questions. And if we want to take these questions and make them objective, we have to be really good about giving evidence that supports the conclusion that won't support other conclusions. And we need to make sure that the evidence we provide does support the conclusion that we're making. Now, having said that, please provide evidence. I've been reading some where there's not really evidence. The evidence is, well, it says in the book. Well, so the the author of the book can be wrong or they can be right. One of my favorite works from the Transcendentalist movement was Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance. But I enjoy reading all of Emerson's work, but Emerson has made the point that we read a book and we think that the person who wrote that book must be really intelligent and know because they've written and published a book. Well, it was a lot harder to get a book published in Emerson's day than it is now. You can self-publish now at no cost to yourself online. But in Emerson's day, it was very difficult to get published. He was trying to make the point that just because someone gets published doesn't mean they're smarter than us. In one passage, he mentions, and it's been probably 30 years since I've read this, but he mentions how we read a book that might have been written by someone who was 28 years old at the time they wrote it and no more intelligent or wise than we were when we were 28. And here we are at 50 years old and have some life experience behind us. And we forget that maybe where we are now is in a better place intellectually than that person was when they wrote their book. So just keep in mind that publishing it in a book doesn't make it true. I mean, I can find books that proclaim that our last two presidents were the best president ever, and books that proclaim that they were the worst president ever. The ones who claim that Biden was the best will claim that Trump is the worst. The ones that claim that Trump is the best will claim that Biden is the worst. Those are written in books. Just because it's written in a book doesn't make it true. Okay. Well, you might have think that I have beat this topic to the end of its usefulness, but it's very important that we understand that this is an academic setting, not a political setting. So, in order to truly go into a political setting and be effective at convincing people who are logical, we need to have good logic, not dislogic. Well, sorry for going so long. I will see you next video.